好，同志们，好，同志们，我们伟大来的，我们是中国现在 China Now with your gang of two. Nan Su, who is the senior investigative reporter for Epoch Times, and yours truly, Michael Olson, who long ago was dissuaded from becoming a China hand by the great helmsman himself, Mao Zedong. Well, in the first hour, we touched on the relationship between China and Russia. And the reason we did so is because we're hit with a big Wall Street Journal op-ed, as it were, discussing that there might be a significant difference in the roles Putin and Xi played with each other. Whereas in the beginning of things, or at least in 2013, when Xi Jinping came into power, he went up to Moscow and reached an agreement with Xi Jinping or with Vladimir Putin, and he looked at Putin and said, "This is my role model. He is my role model." Now, why on earth he would say that of Putin? You know, the reason given was that he was so impressed that Putin could have a seat and power with a country that's only the only thing it could do was sell oil to the world and natural resources. It had no diverse economy like China and America. And yet here he was at the peak of power of the world's power brokers. And so Xi Jinping thought that was really cool. And yet here we are, 2026. For the 14th time, Putin goes to Beijing to try to sell a new pipeline. And a couple of observations from German business people that Wall Street Journal quote about this trip of Putin to Beijing to sell a pipeline. This from Jörg Wuttke, who is a veteran German business executive with long experience in China-Russian relations. He said, Xi received Putin like an emperor receiving his visitor in his castle and sent him home without a deal. And Alexander Gubov, who from the Carnegie Berlin Center, told the Wall Street Journal that it's better for China to wait a little longer until the economic situation in Russia deteriorates further, until the country is on its knees and ready to agree to terms favorable to China. And then, the article talks about the difference between Russia and China in the 60s and Russia's heavy hand in dealing with China and how that proceeded, and how today, in 2013, when Xi Jinping came to power, China was only 10% of Russia's foreign trade, and today it's 40% of Russia's foreign trade. So in essence, and that's mostly oil. In mostly the other thing, very interesting observation made in this Wall Street Journal piece is that Xi kind of looms over Putin in all of the photographs that were made during that visit. And they recalled an Obama observation about Putin. Obama said, Putin looks like the bored kid at the back of the classroom. And it's a way of denigrating Putin. But it is a Wall Street Journal presented assertion that the roles are one in which now Xi Jinping is in charge and Vladimir Putin is second and subservient. Now, when this war started, Nansu, it was my impression or opinion that China was encouraging Russia to invade Ukraine so as to weaken America and the West at no cost to China. Get them involved in Russia and Ukraine, let them shoot all their ammunition off there. And also, that's what happened in the Middle East. So we had wars going all over the place, except China wasn't involved in any of them, except that it was involved in all of them without having to shoot. Now, it seemed to me like China was using Ukraine and Russia to wear down the United States. Am I wrong in that?
No, you're right.
And the
But
same is true in the Middle East, right?
yes,
And the same is true in the South China Sea.
no. South China is China's own business, right?
Okay.
So South China Sea is China directly confront U.S., United States military and our airlines, right? So now the key here is China will not let Russia down. Xi Jinping is not going to let Putin down. But however, they still have conflict between each other. They have a conflict of interest among that too. It's just same as the conflict of interest between United States and
And
UK, United States came France, United States, and the whole Europe. This is normal. Even you know, you see you idealize the fight between the difference between Xi and Putin, saying they don't help each other. Hey, think about it. Just a week ago, our closest ally Netanyahu, he had a big fight with Trump. Think about that.
that's right.
And you
That's right.
idealize, say, hey, let's go put the wedge between the United States and Israel. That's just a joke,
Mhm.
right? You have that thought, and let's go put a wedge into, and let's the Trump stop helping Israel. Let's just go trying to separate these two.
Okay.
It's just
Well, let
wishful
me,
thinking, that's just entire wishful thinking, but it's dangerous. That thinking is dangerous because that make China and Russia less threat.
oh, I think it makes them a greater threat to me. So let me pursue my wishful thinking for just a minute. Now, I think that China's ultimate goal is to turn Russia into a subservient satellite state of China.
Oh yeah, Xi Jinping would love to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that but doesn't mean we can trying to put a wedge into it. Okay, Putin uh did not invade Ukraine because Xi Jinping asked him to. Keeping that in mind, the
No, I'm
alliance.
sure that's true, but I'm sure Xi Jinping thought, "Well, go right ahead, you idiot, and see where that's going to take you."
No, it's not. Xi Jinping
Okay.
has interest that in Ukraine. We talked about that before. Xi Jinping want oil from Russia, and that he also want the food
We
from Ukraine.
Ukraine,
That's
right?
why he support him. There's a reason that Xi Jinping support Putin, and that reason never changed, right? So now, and Russia and China, they're back to back, support each other because Putin want to recover, well, want Russia to go back to czars, right? And so his expansion is towards to the west, and Xi Jinping's expansion is towards to the east and south, in South
North.
China Sea, right? That
Yeah.
east and south towards Japan, towards Taiwan, towards the Philippines. So they are back to back. That's the kind of alliance. They will and never abandon each other. Good luck thinking of
Okay.
driving them away.
And I also think China's expansion is to the northeast and Siberia.
No, I don't think so. I
Okay.
the alliance, this is what Americans do not understand. When the right after the fall of Berlin Wall, China started working with Russia to normalize the once disputed border.
Mhm.
Who else China settled their border with except Russia? Huh? China has a border dispute with South Korea, with Japan, with Taiwan, with Brunei, with Malaysia, Indonesia, the Philippines, and India. Every country pretty much, around China. China has a border dispute, but they only settled the dispute with Russia, and they basically permanently, recognize the border, which Chairman Mao did not even uh, settled the dispute with Soviet Union. And Lenin once said they're going to return all those territories back to China. Now, Jiang Zemin basically, right after the fall of Berlin Wall, they start working with Russia, and then it took about 10 years they settled the border dispute. Why? Because they really think about this. The unrestricted warfare against the United States started in the mid 90s.
Yes. When we
So
were great friends.
they
When,
know what their enemy is. And both sides, China, Russia, they both knew at that time starting in 1992 in their mind, they knew who they're going after. They're going after the entire Western world. And now we're just wishful thinking. One, see, all these people, that's how the wishful thinking started. Like Henry Kissinger started wishful thinking, and all these years coming along, we still have this kind of a wishful thinking.
it's very interesting when Kissinger took Nixon to China. I happened to be studying Chinese from language books written during the Great Cultural Revolution. And what I saw in those language books and what I saw from what news I could find coming out of the cracks in the Great Iron Wall of China was not, this is not something we want to do. And we did it. And we did it because we were in Panda Love.
Right?
We were
So
completely delusional.
see, this it is these people that are the Wei Ling Ling that you talk about. She's Chinese. I mean, I don't know what her background is, but she's supposed to know what's going on, and the way for a Chinese to write this kind of article, I don't know. I don't see.
Well, I like the fact that we can put it on the table and talk about it because this is something you could not do in China.
Well, that's of course. There's this is
And
something that
and I
you
was
cannot
wondering
do.
if that
But
if
who someone who get out of China and came into the United States and write that kind of article. Well, if she was already born in China, if she was born here in the United States, I kind of can understand. But if she was from China and writing that kind of article, that just make me feel suspicious.
okay, fair enough. But that we are here talking about this, we put this issue on the table and try to hash it out. And I go back to the opening of the show last hour and the presentation from the Pew Research Center in its latest release of a survey that found that more people are now have a more favorable impression of China than they do of the United States. That we're here hashing this stuff out and raising the blood pressure as we are. That doesn't happen in China. So the fact that people can only get good news out of China, do you think that has an impact on how people perceive the world? Here were two Americans going at it over this issue. You don't find that in China. You don't
Of
find
course not. Of course not.
and do you think the lack of conflict in Chinese discourse is one of the reasons people might have a favorable view of China, a more favorable view of China than they would of Americans who are hooting and hollering trying to work something out?
Well, you can't compare the situation between United States and China, right? The Pew
Oh,
Center.
but we do. Everybody does.
Pew Center's survey was not from about. It's not from focus. They're not asking people in China for their opinion. They're asking they ask opinion from Europeans. They have the same democracy with us, and they have the freedom of speech. And it was all these, people have a rosy picture, who driving the course of U.S. government all these years of the U.S. government's China policy that lead to what happened, right?
Well,
So all these people, they, from we have a democracy ever since the 1776. But then, the way that our public opinion plus our government policy went wrong in the wrong direction ever since Henry Kissinger went to Beijing, that basically tell us, we need to be careful. That's what it is. These people, they are actually, this opinion, especially is published by Wall Street Journal, in very certain way. And the Pew Center, and very, established a survey organization that gave this kind of opinion that very certain way. We just need to be careful that we are not go back to the wrong uh, angle of looking at China, looking at Russia again. All
and
these
so
people, it's the same way that Henry Kissinger thinking. They thought there was an easy way.
all
A
we
lot
had to
of
do
people.
is help them get rich. And once they got rich, they would love our way of doing things.
Well,
And
see, this is when when you start thinking there's an easy way to do it. That's how you lay down your guards.
yeah,
That's how you're going to reduce your defense spending. That's how you're going to let the manufacturer leaving United States. See, all these things they give the wrong idea. It has been seriously hurting the United States for almost 50 years. We should not, let those things uh, lead our way. And your this is the second program I'm on talking about this article. You
oh,
know,
okay.
so a lot of people talking about the article. It already made an influence. That's why I came so strong. This this all this wrong idea and logic and mistake in how we look at the situation. It's going to eventually be reflected into our U.S. government's foreign policy. That's a serious mistake.
And into how the world sees us and how the world sees China.
Hold on. When Reagan, standing in front of a Berlin Wall and say, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear
Tear
down this
down this wall.
wall, open this gate," almost the entire war against him. He got a lot of criticism too. Now, the problem is he was right. He was the almost only one he was right. Everybody else was thinking he was crazy, right? It, it, these public opinions, it's public opinions. It just means a lot of people believe their opinion. It doesn't mean it's right.
That's for sure. That is for sure. And it's public opinion is manipulatable, and it is manipulated. And it's manipulated by both sides. And I think China does a much better job of manipulating public opinion simply by virtue of the fact that they don't allow one side of the equation to be expressed.
Yeah, we're we're not talking about China. We're talking about the Western world. China is totally different animal. You can't compare, right? And
Okay.
we have democracy here. We can do debate here, and that's what we're doing today. So that article get published. The articles in China that the CCP doesn't like it. It doesn't even get the opportunity to be published. So now, but the key here is the article already published. They already expressed their opinion, right? So we just need to be careful that we are not led by the article for our opinion.
Well, with that, um, quickly, I'd like to switch our focus to China and discuss a couple things. One, and this is an article posted, I guess, where is this? Is in this was in Epoch Times. China's economy faces a double blow, and it has two distinct problems. The first is an external supply shock caused by the U.S. Iran conflict. The second is a domestic structural downturn that predates the conflict by several years. In fact, China's economy is going to hell in a handbasket. And it's compounded by the costs associated with this war. And so China is coming to grips with how to contend with this. And can it?
Yeah, well, it's China's economy actually collapsed since 2023 after its real estate industry collapse, right? So we talk about it many times.
Many times.
And now that if you're talking about if you think about this, uh, to have China purchase oil from United States is a good thing. It's the way to defend the peace in the Western Pacific. See, it has been a reality show to China. We can totally just blockade the Middle East oil. China will not get a bit of Middle East oil, and
Which is
that's why China trying to purchase the oil from United States. But they stopped. They stopped once Trump imposed the ceasefire, right? So they immediately stopped. They purchased the U.S. oil, April and May, and then they stopped once we had a ceasefire in place. Now, now, China still want a good deal from Russia. No doubt about that. They say, well, they want to that's what Putin thought. China was forced to buy the oil. China couldn't get the cheap oil from Iran anymore, so he can provide the pretty cheap oil because at that time, what happened? President Trump stopped the sanction on Russians export oil. So Russia actually can sell their oil in the regular international market price for some time. And then China, Putin went to China. That was the whole world need oil. So of course Putin's oil price he trying to give to China. It's not that as cheap as what China wanted. So
right.
that's why China say okay, we will delay this oil contract for now because China just I think that Xi Jinping just want to see the long-term result of this war, and then they will make a decision. Now, if we keep now this is the key. If we keep that oil at $80 or $90 level, if Trump has the way to make this war sustainable, which basically means, you know, in whatever the way, we got the reimbursement for this military fight from the Middle East. Well, of course, Middle East they're going to increase the oil price. Now, as long as that oil price keep in a pretty high level, of course, you and I we're going to pay, right? We all have to pay. Now, but however, the result is American oil companies are making money, and you look, China it's going to make agreement with Russia too, that they're going to want the Russia oil. Eventually they're going to accept it. The Putin's offer. You think about it. There's no way we can. Uh, that wishful thinking that we are going to drive a wedge between China and Russia. China just want
Well,
they
Trump
know.
tried that for years.
Yeah,
Trump tried
it's
to
just not going to work.
tried to do a reverse Nixon, I guess, for years. And
Yeah. This is just wishful thinking. China and Russia, they broke up. It was an ideological separation, and then went back immediately after the Soviet Union collapse. Right now, Xi Jinping. Now, in 2020, at the beginning when he, came to the leadership of CCP, at the first visit he to Russia, that was the time China was the half size. China's economy from 2001 joining WTO to 2011, the first 10 years, they grow 5 times bigger. And then from 2011, and that's about close to the time that Xi Jinping was in power. From that time to 2021, China's economy double again. So, I would say China's economy, it's much smaller at that time, and Xi Jinping want they continue in the way they build a good relationship with Russia, that started by Jiang Zemin. Yeah, right. And Xi Jinping, from very early on, after he became the leader of CCP, he talked about, the big risk, huge risk. At that time, even the Chinese Communist Party, a lot of people don't even understand what he's talking about. And now they understood because Xi Jinping want to lead China going back to Chairman Mao's time. And then but he has an entire party, pretty much, all the Communist Party officials, government officials, military officials, they all climb up the power ladder through this market economy time of 30, 40 years, right? They
which
are
is a great threat to
to
the direction.
Xi Jinping's way, right?
Yeah.
So, and then that's why Xi Jinping is leading, you know, uh, he's leading the Communist Party to a dangerous direction. Now, that's why ever since the very beginning, when at the time he visited Russia, Russia was much stronger, you know, uh, at that time.
Right.
He
That was the whole point of the article, though, too. Russia was really strong. Now it's really weak.
Yeah, but however, Xi Jinping is not going to let Russia down. That's the key. The conclusion, they lay out
Okay.
the article was not wrong to some of the facts, but what was wrong on the article was the conclusion, right? The conclusion, that China is going to wait until Russia collapses, and China is preparing a next regime leader to prepare to replace Putin. That's totally wrong.
Oh, I don't, yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, that's totally wrong. Who knows what's going to happen in Russia if someone replaces Putin? Can Xi Jinping control that? No. So Xi Jinping wants somebody to take care of his back. The entire border, it's a
Yeah.
super long border between China and Russia. They put a minimum force there because Russia's entire force is in the west and China's entire force in the south and the east. So they are back to back. That's the only way they can, mutually benefit the situation. They can expand together. Russia expand to one direction, China, expand to another direction. Without that kind of a relation, you know, both of them will not be able to really go very far on the way to realize the goal of their own ambition. So that's just not going to change. That's the big picture. The fight between Xi Jinping and Putin is no different than the fight between Trump and Starmer,
Okay.
Trump and Macron, and Trump and the other
So
European.
it's more
They
like
have conflict. And then even Trump even had a fight last week with Netanyahu, right? How are you going to say, oh, you're going to, if anybody thinking about put a wedge between between United States government and Israel government, aren't you going to call this guy crazy? I
Well,
mean,
there are a lot of
article
people
is
in the United
crazy.
States that are trying to make that assertion right now. Ladies and
It's
gentlemen, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'd like to take a look inside China and see how the impact of its economic woes, what impact that's having on its people. So do stay tuned. This is China Now.
It's time now to repair or replace your roof. Hi, folks. Warren Knox here of Knox Roofing. Well, we install leak-proof and fire-proof roofs. Roofs that look nice with a lot of choices of colors and styles. Gutters, skylights, insulation, and roof decks. We only install proven products with warranties unmatched by anybody. Financing is always available, and we have discounts for veterans and seniors. Do business with Knox Roofing, and you'll also receive a free Knox Garden Box. The number to call again is 831-461-0634. Thanks, folks.
Attention investors. This is a simple commercial on the investment value of gold. Gold continues to make new highs. In good markets and in bad markets, you need to have your portfolio balanced with gold. Learn about owning physical gold or getting a gold-backed IRA. Make this simple call right now.
800-414-1657. 800-414-1657. That's 800-414-1657.
Sponsored by Reagan Gold.
It's high time to celebrate the opening of the new Hook Outlet Dispensary, 1129 Mission in Santa Cruz. Get in on the opening fun and really low prices on the Hook's unmatched selection of top-quality medical and recreational cannabis flower, vapes, drinks, gummies, and concentrates. The Hook Outlet is now the West Side's source for finest cannabis at the lowest prices. Get in on all the opening fun and low prices at the all-new Hook Outlet. HookOutlet.com for details and deals.
Charlie Hong Kong is here to nourish you with our healthy noodle and rice bowls, abundant with local organic produce grown in nutrient-dense soil, as well as soups, sandwiches, salads, and our special ginger lemonade. All are welcome to enjoy our patio or to go. Order in person or online, corner of Soquel and Seabright. Charlie Hong Kong, nourishing our community one bowl at a time.
Welcome back. We were talking about the relationship between China and Russia. Now let's look at the relationship of China to China. As we mentioned, there are three major blows to China's economy that we're looking at. First is the external shock caused by the U.S.-Iran conflict. Costs a lot more to get the oil they need to run that country. And therefore, their advantage in manufacturing is cut down because it costs more to fuel the furnaces of industries now. The second is the domestic structure caused by the collapse in the real estate bubble and so on, that's been going on for several years now. But the third is natural calamities, including typhoons, collapsing dams, tofu drag construction, and so on and so on, having an impact on China's economy, the slowest growth measured in China since 2022. What was 2022? Well, of course, it was the COVID years. So China's economy is slowing down rapidly, a rapid deceleration in the economy. So what happens? People are starting to get edgy in China. And how does the CCP react when people are getting edgy and starting to complain? Well, what they're doing is they're tightening censorship controls throughout the country, and they're pursuing people who share videos of floods and labor disputes and other sensitive incidents. It's getting tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. How tight can it get, Nansu, before it blows up?
Oh, it's a long way to go. It's a
Oh,
long, long, long way to go. It's if they have guns,
they're like the
think about
Mujahideen that
Iraq,
run Iran.
let's just think about Saddam Hussein. How many how many years he's been doing that? He only have 20% of the people. Now in Iran, 60% of it was the Shia, 40% of the Sunnis, and among that 40% of the Sunnis, 20% are the Kurds. What are the Kurds? So, he literally only have 20% of people supporting him, right? So, he how long that regime last? See, this is the way it is. So, don't think it's going to go easy, right? I don't think
What did Mao say about political power comes from the barrel of a gun?
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's what they're doing, right? That's what they're doing. That's why, Xi Jinping trying to say use traditional Chinese culture to in combine with Marxism and Leninism. Now, make no mistake, the so-called traditional um, Chinese culture in Xi Jinping's mouth is the worst part of tradition, the legalism. The legalism we talked about last in our last show. This Confucianism, Taoism, Buddhism, those are the best of traditional Chinese culture. They are all suppressed in China. But the legalism, it's the worst part, the traditional Chinese culture that, you know, military, just like basically North Korea, military gets priority. Government treat people as enemy. They try to, weaken the society folks. They, they don't want any society, uh, uh, any possibility the society can be united, like the nonprofit organization, those things. They don't want any of those. And so Xi Jinping is using the garbage of traditional Chinese culture combined with garbage of Western culture, communism, and should try to rule China into its future. Now, it, China is not up to the point, the people rising up, and we don't see that, we don't see the Chinese society that did the same thing like what Iranian
Well, you
society.
can't even take a picture of a flood to
That's right.
complain.
So it's just not there yet. So just, don't even. Yes,
Don't
people
look
don't
for
have
any
a.
don't
Yeah,
look for any hope there.
right. Don't put any hope now. Why China's economy start going down? There are two reasons. There are two reasons. One is inside, one is outside. Inside, it's they're socialist. It's a government driving economy, and then government control the lands. They're selling the lands. They're making the money, right? So it's this pretty much the central plan economy still, more or less.
Doesn't it even go beyond a centrally planned economy? Doesn't it also almost go to the extent that it's a centrally owned economy too?
It's a more or less yes, and then that's that economy can only go. Keeping in mind Soviet Union's economy went booming, 50s and 60s, and then they start, and then that 20 years they're booming, and then in the 70s they start slowing down, and it took the like in 15 20 years for it to die, right? So China same way, right? China's economy booming, it peaked and somewhere between 2019 and 2023. We don't know the exact time because that's COVID lockdown time. But somehow during that few years, it start dying, it start collapsing. The internal reason for the economy to go die is just because the communist economy, they can only go booming for a certain amount of years. So that's it. And the second reason, it's the U.S. government start leading the world change their China policy. It started when Trump swore into the White House in his first term. In the January of 2018, I was in tears. I still remember that. Because why? Because Trump imposed 25% of tariffs on China's, solar panel. That's how everything started. When I heard that news, I was in tears, And also, Trump, before his he after he was elected in his first term, in 2016 November, and now less than 30 days, he picked up the phone or called Taiwan's president Tsai Ing-wen. That almost brought me to tears. So that's the starting point, and then all these things start changing. One external reason, another internal reason. That two come together. That's the main reason China's economy start collapsing. Now, it will take a long time. It's not something that going to be, it's something that we're going to see the collapse of the Chinese Communist government, in the next 5 years or so. It just take a long time. We need a consistency moving in that direction. We can't change. We can't thinking any easy way.
It seemed like when Trump backed away from China and led American manufacturing away from China, other countries, most notably Germany, jumped right in and made very good business with China and made a lot of money with China. But
Well,
now,
that's why, if you go back to the Donroe doctrine, which was written
The Monroe Doctrine, which patterned
Donroe
after the
doctrine.
Monroe Doctrine, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was published, basically written in the National Security Strategy published by White House November of last year. If you look at that, Germany was the only European country who was mentioned in that article, in that strategy, because it was the worst example. Now, Germany still, at least in November of last year, when the report was published, Germany is still building some of the world's largest chemical
Right.
plants in China by using oil imported from Russia. So, well, they were keep doing what they are, and Trump was right to withdraw the U.S. force from Germany. I mean, look at what they have done. I mean, when for at least the first 2 years, after Putin invaded Ukraine, and Germany was a part of the big criers of the European countries talking about sanction Russia, but they are still buying oil from Russia. They are the ones supporting the invasion. Just
It just doesn't make any sense. Well,
it's a fake. It's just German government is just big fake. It just making nonsense. So
there's good
they
news on that.
invest too much in
Yeah,
China,
there's some good
but
news
they
on
don't
that.
even have the guts to turn things around.
Well, in a piece by Anders Kor, a good friend, he asserts that Germany's government and leading corporations are increasingly at odds over their relationship with China. Why is that? Because China just invaded Germany with all of its manufactured goods and cars, and essentially is putting Germany out of business.
Well,
And
that's what
finally,
it is.
it's waking up.
All these European going back to the beginning of today's program, that when we talk about the Pew Center survey, right?
Right?
They don't have to respect the United States. They want China, that's fine. But eventually they're going to wake up after they lost too much. They have not lost enough yet. So now in Germany, right now we can clearly it didn't start today recently. It started like a couple years ago. They already have debate internally in Germany. They have people start raising the questions about their relation with China, but that gets stronger and stronger. But those are people are the people care about the security of of Germany. They care about the economic health of Germany. But the one against them, the one want to continue to
The
uh,
New World Order people,
no, those are the people like Volkswagen, right? Like
right?
BMW, right? The ones, what was I keep forgetting, the five rings, the car with the five
Audi,
Audi, right? So those people, and then Mercedes,
yeah.
right? They invest too much in China, so they continuously influence the German government, and now, and also you have a bunch of European leaders. Their minds still in the age of a global economy. They don't like it. They don't they want to give China DEI. So all these things, that's their problem. We shall not let their problem become our problem. Our problem is the Western Pacific. Now, the that's why it's a perfect timing. We can rely on our European allies, but it's perfect timing right now because China's economy is weak and Russia, drag it into Ukraine. They cannot do anything. It's a perfect time to target Iran and solve the problem in Iran. So that will greatly weaken the evil axis of China, Russia, and Iran and North Korea. So if we don't do it now, we'll never
Yeah,
go,
if we don't do it now, we won't
never
do it.
happen.
It'll never
Never.
happen, yeah. Well, following up on the situation with respect to German car makers, Volkswagen is considering laying off yet more workers in 2026, this time 100,000 of them, in part because of its competition with China. They include 45,000 German workers at four plants, in addition to 50,000 phased layoffs agreed to in 2024. So they're up to
It's good. It's good. They have to learn through
maybe, yeah,
that way.
and maybe they'll
When the
wake up.
hammer drop on their head, right? Guess what? Tesla, same way. It's the same way that Yahoo was the first one to China, and then after they build up the Baidu and Alibaba, they kick out Yahoo, right? And then Microsoft, and also Google. Google wants to withdraw from China, but after they hired the Chinese mother of AI, so-called Li Fei Li, and they went back to China. So all these companies, they're going to learn after the regime put the hammer on their heads. So eventually they're going to learn that. They're not going to listening. These people, of course, they're going to say, oh, they like China more than they like the United States. Though that's what it's the same
That
people.
Trump is so mean.
Yeah, well, they're going to learn, Tesla was so beaten down in China, and because their government
True.
subsidized the electrical cars, EV, are so cheap, much cheaper than Tesla. And then, Tesla eventually they're going to just withdraw from China, like Yahoo did, like, eventually, like Microsoft did. And
Like just about everybody else did,
yeah,
because
see,
China
it's
eats
just
everything up.
those also you can see how long those like Pew Centers uh, a public opinion can last. Maybe a few more years. Let them be.
Well, China still has significant strength in its manufacturing, moving a lot of its manufacturing offshore to Mexico, to Canada, to everywhere.
Yeah, well, now for Americans, keep in mind we are paying back the debt we owe our next generation. We have been living on the cheap product from China for our entire lifetime. But we but this increasing oil price for us to pay, it's the something that's going to deeply hurt the Chinese economy. And then that's the way we pay back our debt that we owe our own children and grandchildren. That's what it is. We need to pay it. I support, the huge increase of our defense budget. Even I pay twice the tax. I will support it.
Because we're
We're
protecting our
doing that for
children.
our next generation
Yeah.
and the generation after. So, that's very important. But I don't want to pay tax for all these green BS. I want to pay the tax to increase our defense budget.
Defense. Okay. Well, as we've seen, we sure are benefit by having a strong defense because we can defend against Iran's nuclear weapons. And if you don't think Iran would use those nuclear weapons, I think you should think again because I'm sure they would. If it would give Iran hegemony over the entire Middle East and all of the oil buried under the sands of the Middle East, would Iran use
Well,
an
you think
atom
about
bomb?
that. See, once the U.S. find some way to have Middle East countries to reimburse the military cost,
Of keeping it open and free.
and then the oil price will increase. Everybody, not just the Americans, everybody all around the world will pay.
Yep.
Now, but however, think about this: the reduce the reduction of the total production in the Middle East means the U.S. oil company are going to make money. The U.S. oil companies like a they drill deep down
Yeah.
the technology, drill deep down. It costs more, a lot more than the Middle East oil. Their oil is just right below the Earth's
Right
surface,
below the surface. All they have to do is
right?
stick a
So
straw in the sand and out it comes.
yeah,
Well,
so now that oil price, we pay a expensive, price for the gas. It's a good thing. It's good for our children and grandchildren. You make a U.S. economy strong.
so
It's
let's all
weaken,
remember our children and our grandchildren.
and
Nancy,
it's going to weaken China's economy, right?
there you go. So thank you very much, Nansu, and thank you all for tuning in. This has been China Now. So much going on. Will we survive? China Now, friend or foe, war or peace. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next week for more China Now.